Hi, I'm Maria Thea Harris, or Velosos on social media. Welcome back to Sober 50's podcast on So Organized Style. Make sure you like and subscribe So Organized Style podcast on your podcast app and on YouTube. In the book, you also talked about how through knitting you've randomly met people as well.
I made a good friend knitting on the
Yes.
subway. She was actually just here. She left today. She was visiting from Texas.
That's Nicole Nehrig, who has launched her book called With Her Own Hands, Women Weaving Their Story. It's been published by WW Norton and Company. Grab a cuppa to hear Nicole's story behind the book and the stories that she's included in her book called With Her Own Hands. So
Great.
Is it fabric that you bought locally?
It's knitted. I knitted it.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's amazing.
Thank you.
So it wasn't one of these pieces that you knitted, unraveled, and knitted again.
No, this one I didn't do much unraveling, thankfully.
It's very good.
Thank you.
That's okay. I mean, that's not why we're caught up together today, right?
I mean, it kind of is.
Nicole, thank you for coming on to So Organized Style podcast today.
Thank you for having me, Maria.
It was really lovely that Poppy reached out to me to tell me about you and your book. Otherwise, I would never come across it. And I've really enjoyed getting stuck into the stories in your book.
Thank you.
That's okay. Now, what got you to the point of writing this book? What got you to the point where you started to do all this research and pull it together?
Knitting has always had a lot of meaning to me ever since I started when I was 25. I was self-taught. I kind of figured it out as I went. And I don't know, I was the only person I knew who knitted at the time. And it was kind of at that time a little bit of an oddball thing to be doing, or, not as common as it has become in the last 20 years. But it served a metaphor for me a lot of times. It made me aware of things that I was needing in my own life, what was going on with me, why was I gravitating towards knitting a certain type of project, or why was I knitting tightly, I needed to loosen up in my life too. And there were these metaphors that kind of came through for me. So I've always kind of noticed things in my knitting that have told me things about myself. And when I entered the pandemic and was locked down at home with a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, I had been a VA psychologist and researcher. Research was put on hold during that time. And suddenly, kind of all the ways that I had found fulfillment for my creative and intellectual needs, like social needs, collaborative needs, all of these things that had been fulfilled through my work or through going out with friends and, socialization were really curtailed. And I had to find ways to fulfill those needs within the home, right? So the materials of the home had to serve as all of the tools to find fulfillment in these areas. And I just noticed I was knitting more than ever, which is weird because I had no time. But knitting was the one thing I could do for myself because I could do it alongside childcare. I could do it when I was on a Zoom meeting. I realized, wow, here I am in this situation that a lot of women have found themselves in, being, in the home, taking care of children and everything. And I'm finding that knitting is fulfilling so many of these needs for me. It's creating so much meaning. It's an outlet, unlike a lot of the other outlets of the home, like cooking a dinner can be a creative process, but you do it every day, it gets eaten and goes away. It's not I don't know, it doesn't feel as like tangible or lasting or
Exactly. I was thinking that it doesn't last long. It's just for
it
that
doesn't
time that you're eating.
last.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I was fulfilling these things with my knitting. I was challenging myself. I taught myself how to knit socks and was playing with different ways to turn a heel and really doing more complicated color work projects. I just found oh, wow, I am fulfilling a lot of these needs that I had fulfilled through research and everything in this work. And I wonder if women at other times and places throughout the world had done the same in their textile work. textile work has taken up countless hours of women's lives throughout history, men's too, but women were more often the primary textile creators, to weave enough clothes and, bedding and all of that to take care of your family and then maybe to have some left over to sell or something took just 10 hours a day for many women. So it was something that took up a lot of their time. And how did they find meaning and purpose in it? What did they use, in that to find fulfillment? So that really was the jumping off point for the research. And I started then just reading. I didn't have any intention of writing a book at that point. I just wanted to know these answers. And I figured,
Yeah.
okay, I can read about it. And as I was reading, I didn't find a lot of material that answered my particular question. I found a lot of things about the role of textile work in the economy, the important role that it played in technological advances, the sociocultural role of textiles in, sharing ideas and passing on traditions and recording history and things like that. But I didn't find a lot of like a given woman's experience. And that makes sense because textile work was such a ubiquitous thing. Not many people thought to ask women, like, oh, hey, this weaving you're doing, like, what does that mean to you? And I think a lot of women probably didn't even think about that for themselves. And then certainly it, was rare to have it written down. So there weren't a lot of personal stories, but that's what I really wanted. So I thought if I can like dig through the literature more and see what I can find, and then if I can talk to people in the present and understand what it means to women now all around the world, then maybe I can make some sense of what it might have meant to women in other points of time as well.
While you were doing your research, was a lot of this during the time where you were forced to be at home for yeah.
The beginning of it, thankfully, we got vaccinated and could travel a bit. And so I was allowed to go to places beyond my home, which was nice.
Yeah.
And I went to Peru, I went to Iceland, I went to Portugal and France, and to Alabama, and, just kind of tried to talk to people there and understand more of the traditions. And then I got to Zoom with people in other parts of the world as well, that places I couldn't get to just in the time that I was researching the book. And it was wonderful. I was so confined to the home during the pandemic and this experience, and I was like longing for something, longing for
Mm.
travel, longing for connection to people, feeling so isolated. And this research really took me so far beyond the walls of my home and allowed me to connect with this community of textile creators all over the world.
By the time you could get out, you probably already had your travel plans organized. I'm going
Some
here.
of them, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah,
But also during that period, you did, what was it, 12 adult size sweaters in 12 months you knitted?
that's right. That's right. Yeah. And some socks and hats and scarves and things. Yeah. It was a
Did
very productive time.
productive, and did you, the yarn and the needles, did you already have them or were you constantly buying online?
I bought some online. I do have a healthy stash of yarn. I love having creative materials available to me. And that was like a nervousness I had when the pandemic started. Like, uh-oh, what if I'm not able to get my creative materials? And for a while, there were shortages of things. I had some angst that there was going to be shortages and I wouldn't get yarn. But I did have a lot of yarn here already. And then I was able to get some.
In the book, you also talked about how through knitting you've randomly met people as well.
I made a good friend knitting on the
Yes.
subway. She was actually just here. She left today. She was visiting from Texas, and she came to the Sheep and Wool Festival in Rhinebeck with me 2011, and we were knitting on the subway. I sat down and pulled out my knitting and then looked next to me, and the woman next to me was knitting, and she looked about my age, and we just looked at each other and said, "What are you knitting?" and went from there, and we've been dear friends ever since. She taught me how to sew also, which was such a gift.
So what's your preference now?
Knitting is
Okay.
definitely my preference, but I do some sewing, and I've started doing, she's a great quilter. I've started doing some quilting, which I'm really enjoying. And now I have a daughter who crochets and a son who spins wool. And so I've increased their stashes as well.
Oh, that's good. You're looking after the children.
Yes.
Okay, let's go back to the book because we've just gone off on a tangent about you, which has been really lovely. So within the book, you've done all your research and there are the chapters and the stories in there that are very self-contained, and at the back there are all of the references. So as I was saying before we came on, I think the value of all the references you've got at the back of the book it will allow people to really go down a rabbit hole and investigate a whole lot more.
Yeah,
So
that's the rabbit hole I went down, so they can follow my lead. I've
so
left some yarn to lead to guide them.
some more threads to follow.
Yeah, more threads to follow.
Yeah. But I'm not going to unravel this any further because you're going to tell us about why you picked those 7 chapters.
I kind of thought about what are the sources of meaning in
Okay.
life,
Yep.
and important, um, not that they're the only sources of meaning, but as a psychologist, I'd say these are some pretty critical sources of meaning, which are, social connection, intellectual engagement, creative expression, and kind of identity formation. Being able to earn an income or feel like your work is of value. And being able to stand up for what you believe in, and then being connected to like the life cycle, especially as women, we've often been in charge of birth and death, giving birth and weaving shrouds for burial and, being the kind of custodians of that life cycle. So I kind of use those as sources of meaning. And then the stories in the chapters kind of illustrate how women have found that source of meaning
Mm.
or met that source of meaning through textile work.
I was doing a very long read of Unraveling Emotions
Hmm.
chapter because I felt that um, sewing can, because I'm a sewist and I'm sure it's the same for knitting, you have your ups and downs. You start a project, you have an idea, the whole process takes you everywhere, but
Hmm.
there are times in your life where you just have to not do it or do
Hmm.
it for a particular reason.
I notice that for myself
Mm.
again with the kinds of projects I'm drawn to. Sometimes it's like I just want the simplest stockinette project. I want it to be boring and not anything I have to think about. And other times I feel like I really want a challenge. Sometimes I just want the meditative, soothing, calming experience of stitching, or to be able to be focused on something else, or to allow a space for my mind to rest because I've been so busy with other things. I don't want to have to think in my knitting too. And other times I feel like really energized to take on a challenge and, do a more complex project. With the ups and downs with projects, certainly times where I've been so frustrated. I remember being up at, 12:30 at night, unraveling a neckline because I messed up and it's not fitting right and everything. And was like so frustrated. And my husband was like, "What are you doing? You're never up this late." And I was like, I've got to fix this neckline. It's driving me crazy. And I'm so upset with myself for, doing this neckline this way. And he was like, I thought knitting was supposed to be relaxing. I was like,
Well,
uh, sometimes it is, and sometimes it's really frustrating. It can be all sorts of things at all sorts of times. And it gives us sometimes an opportunity to contend with the kinds of things we face in life in bigger ways, but in a kind of low stakes experience. Like
mhm.
this neckline was not really going to like have terrible repercussions in my life. Worst, it's a sweater I don't wear very often, which it ended up being, unfortunately. It's a place to make mistakes and deal with making mistakes and figure out how we cope with mistakes. And are we hard on ourselves? Why are we hard on ourselves? Can we be kinder to ourselves? Can we find a way to problem solve and fix the mistake, right? Or do we
Yeah.
just unravel and start again? And I think that it's creates these lovely experiences where we can, try things out and have kind of emotional experiences in like a kind of safe, circumscribed way.
And it is a very safe environment when you're
Yes.
just knitting or sewing, as long as no one gets hurt.
Yeah,
especially your
right.
own hands.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
take care of yourself, do your wrist stretches and take breaks.
And I think it's also um, a good way of being in a low risk environment where you are experiencing all of those emotions. And at some point, you just have to cut your losses and move on and figure out.
Hmm.
So it's a lot of working around problem solving, again, in a low risk environment.
And sometimes it gives us what we're needing in life that we can't get because life does have a lot of problems and we're struggling to know how to solve them and approach them. And then it's like, okay, well, at least in my knitting, there's a place where I can problem solve. At least in my knitting, there's a place I can fix my mistakes and I don't feel totally helpless and everything. So I think that that's also really meaningful to think about where can we find the fulfillment of those things when we can't find them in our daily lives.
Also, the ability to find communities that can provide you with ideas, inspiration, pathways is fairly similar to life when you need help. You can identify that you need help and then look at where to find that help. I know it's a long bow, but it's a skill that you get through knitting and sewing that helps with life, which I think is where you're coming from.
Yeah, I think that's another aspect of it that I think is great. And the textile creator community is usually very supportive and happy to help, right? You go into a
Mm.
knitting store or fabric store or something and say like, I need help with this, and or you can join a class or you can join a sewing circle and have a bunch of people around. And if you have a question, they'll answer. And there are online communities like that too. And for most of us now, we don't have to do it. It is a choice.
Yeah,
And if we choose to do it, it's because we love it. And then we want to share it with somebody, right? Like if somebody asks me to teach them how to knit, I feel like, oh my gosh, I'm thrilled. I can give you like the greatest gift in the world because this has been such a great gift for me. And to be able to share it with somebody else feels like an honor.
it does. So, from the fact that you've gone through, developed the book, done the research, what are maybe two aspects that people should delve into more when they're looking or reading your book?
It's so interesting. So many people that I talked to
Mm.
did not see their work as creative. You know, if you're a textile artist or something, you see your work as creative. If you're a designer, you likely see your work as creative. But a lot of people who like follow patterns and everything would say, oh, like I just follow patterns. Like I'm
Mhm.
not creative in my knitting. I was always like, well, do you like choose your own colors for the thing that you're making? Do you find your own fabrics or do you just, do you use like a kit and things are just packaged as they are? And some people sometimes use a kit, but a
Yep.
lot of people were choosing their own fabrics or modifying patterns, kind of tailoring it to their taste. And, it's interesting to not think of that as creative. Even if you are using a kit, you're creating something and that
Mm.
is actually creative. And along the way, you're likely problem solving all sorts of little steps like, ooh, I'm like having a hard time sewing this curve. And what's the best way for me to do it? And you're creative problem solving the
Mm.
steps. Own the creativity of the work you do. If you're making something with your hands, it's a creative endeavor. The other thing I think is thinking about how this work can like help us process emotions,
Yep.
the way we use it in that way, or the way we use it to like learn something about ourselves. Like it can be kind of a therapeutic and reflective process. That's another thing. Some people know, like, oh, I know when I'm feeling upset, I go to my sewing table, and I work it all out in the cloth. But other people I think are doing that, but maybe aren't as aware that it's regulating them in some way. It's soothing. And when you know what it's doing for you, you can really work with that and use that consciously. Okay, this is a time when I know I'm going to be stressed out and I should bring my English paper piecing project with me, or I should bring, my crochet with me. I should have a project to work on so
Mm.
that I can soothe myself in a difficult situation. I think we've covered good ground. The
Okay.
book can be found anywhere books are sold. I always recommend supporting your local bookstore and your local library. If you have any trouble finding the book, you can look on my website, NicoleNehrig.com, and there's a link to ordering the book from a lot of different sites.
Where else can we find you online? Are you on Instagram or?
I am on Instagram. I'm at Nicole Nehrig, and that's about it. I don't
Okay.
do a lot. Oh, and I'm on Ravelry for the knitters out there, and I'm nerdy knitting.
I was going to ask you about Ravelry, but then I thought,
Yeah.
oh, no, that's good. And I would have expected that you would know all about knitting and the communities, the online communities. And I'm not a knitter, but Ravelry I've heard of.
Ravelry is a big one. I think there are something like 9 million members.
Mm, very big.
And I know people, when I was at Sheep and Wool, New York Sheep and Wool, I was giving a talk on the social fabric and how textiles bring us together as a community, which was perfect for that event. And one woman said, "Oh, I met one of my best friends on Ravelry and we're here together. She lives far away, but we come to this together every year." And I think that's just amazing. They met because one of them needed help on a pattern or something, and the
Hmm.
other one volunteered to help. And then they just kind of started having some back and forth and became good friends and now go to Rhinebeck together.
It's not an unusual situation, right?
Yeah.
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 And before we finish up, the sweater that you're wearing, you've
Hmm.
knitted that?
I did.
Because it's got lots of different colors, even though it's still on grid as well.
Right. It's a color changing yarn. It's Spin Cycle,
Oh.
which for the knitters out there, they'll know it. It's very popular now. And it's called the Great Gingham Raglan Sweater by Jessie May.
It's awesome. Uh,
Thank
I,
you.
I don't knit, but the fact that you've got everything lined up and the colors, it's just really great. It's wonderful work, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on to Soul Organized Style podcast today.
Thank you. This was a pleasure.
It's been a pleasure for me to meet you and to hear your story as well.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
This episode of Soul Organized Style podcast for Sober 50 was both video and audio produced by me, Maria Thea Harris, in my sewing room, with permission of Nicole and her publisher WW Norton and Company. Sound by Knife on YouTube. Many thanks for the ongoing support of the podcast Patreon contributors. Their paid membership enables me to create these video and audio podcasts for you for free. You can subscribe to So Organized Style Podcast, but with an S, not a Z, on all good podcast apps and on YouTube. And yes, if you live in Australia and you decide to buy your own Mimi Quinn, I'll be your body scanner. Make sure you go back and listen to our free Sober 50 episodes on Soul Organized Style Podcast. Direct message Sandy and the editors at Sober 50 on Instagram to contribute to the ongoing posts and challenges the team promotes to the community. I look forward to joining you in your sewing room next time. Stay safe, everyone.